Number 5. The Fresno nightcrawlers. Starting off the list is going to be my favorite cryptids in the whole wide world, the Fresno nightcrawler. If you've never seen footage of them, it's going to change your life. Look at them. Look at the way they stride around like a pair of pants that came to life. These things are the absolute perfect cryptid to me. There's never been a story of them hurting anything or anyone. There's no livestock that goes missing when the nightcrawlers are around. It's just some chill dudes going for a late night stroll. I can really get down with the lifestyle that the Fresno nightcrawlers are about. The nightcrawlers were first spotted in Fresno, California, which makes a lot of sense why they're called that. They've been mostly spotted in California almost exclusively, a couple times, save for one reported sighting in Poland, so must have been a pretty long walk they were going on. The first recorded sighting was by a man in Fresno named Jose, who claimed that during the night he heard his dogs freaking out at something outside. He went to go see what his dogs were making so much noise about, and through a security camera system in his home, he saw the two little crawlers making their way around. He woke up his brother to come watch the footage as well, but by the time he'd awoken, the creature was already gone. The next morning, they called in investigators to inspect the lawn and the footage, but there was absolutely no trace of anything. No footprints, no spots, nothing. All they had was grainy CCTV footage of the night crawlers making their way down the lawn. Since their sighting, there's been endless debate as to just what the night crawlers are. Some suspect spirits or ghosts, because they do look kind of spectral in the video, but a number of people have also put forward the idea that the night crawlers could be visitors from another world. They don't look like anything on this planet, so maybe they came down. Who's to say? The only person who can truly decide is you. And hey, if you want to see loads more videos of things what might be cryptids or what might be aliens, then you already know the vibe. It's Top 5 Scary. We got more videos of cryptids and aliens that you could ever watch, but you're welcome to try. Stay subscribed and don't miss a scream. Number 4. The Enfield Horror. The Enfield Horror is a pretty notable cryptid in American history, and it gets its name from a small string of sightings when it terrorized the town of Enfield, Illinois. The creature has been described as a small, goblin-esque being. Oh, you know how I feel about goblins. It doesn't really resemble any living animals on this planet that it could very easily be described as. It's reported as having 3 legs and leathery skin and moving in a vaguely monkey-esque way compared to a baboon hopping around. So the first time the Enfield Horror was ever spotted, it was in 1973 by one Henry McDaniel. He and his wife had been out that night and were returning home and were greeted by their children. The kids had told their father that there was something they'd seen outside that was trying to get inside the house by scratching on the door. Mr. McDaniel initially assumed it was probably just a cat or a dog, but later on during the night, that peculiar scratching came back again at the front door. He went out to shoo the animal away and was shocked at what he saw. He described to police that it had 3 legs on it, a short body, 2 little short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It stood 4.5 feet tall and was grayish colored, and it was trying to get into their house. McDaniel saw this weird little thing and thought best to rid the world of it and fired at it. He claims he struck the creature, telling police that, "When I fired that first shot, I know I hit." He says the creature hissed at him, claiming that it sounded like a wildcat hissing, and then proceeded to bound away in long leaps across the yard. The next day, police were alerted to the story and sent over to investigate the yard as to what happened. They didn't find much, but they did find 3-footed tracks throughout the yard. So just what on earth was the Enfield Horror? Or is that the operative word? Was it of this earth? Could it have been some animal that had lost a leg and was injured limping around? Or is it something that had slipped out of an enclosure from a UFO and was hopping around our planet looking for a new meal? Coming in at number 3 is the Chupacabra, one of the most famous cryptids maybe ever in urban folklore. For those somehow not in the know, the Chupacabra is often thought to be a canid-like monster, and is purportedly responsible for disappearances of livestock, predominantly throughout Mexico and the American Southwest, but also propping up in places like Puerto Rico. You know, a Chupacabra has been around whenever you find that your livestock has either gone missing or is found dead with all its blood sucked right out. This is actually where the name comes from. While most depictions of the Chupacabra almost always define it as being a coyote-like creature, albeit a twisted, mangled-looking one, usually described as a totally hairless dog with beady black eyes and a sleek figure. There are some stories and sightings of Chupacabras that describe it as being more like a demon or an alien. describing it as being a humanoid creature, often reptilian in nature, walking around on two legs and feeding on livestock. In all the years since chupacabras have first been reported, though there are countless sightings, there's never been a fully recovered one that we couldn't explain. Everything that's been found by hunters always ends up turning out to be dogs with mange, being misattributed to being the cryptid. So maybe, is it possible that there's been a giant mix-up, and all the sightings of chupacabras that report them as canines are just that, just sick dogs that get mistaken for looking something weird, and that the real chupacabra is the reptilian, more bipedal sightings that get reported? It could explain why there's never been one recovered, and why livestock keeps going missing under bizarre circumstances. It's even possible that the drained livestock could be creatures that have been recovered to study, abducted under bizarre experiments. Could chupacabras themselves be in a bizarre experiment that's been unleashed into our world? A hybrid chimera breed that was created by alien life and let loose on us to run havoc on us? Number 2. The Dover Demon. The Dover Demon looks outright like an alien, maybe more so than anything else on this list. Its description describes it as a pale, naked, leathery creature with a giant watermelon-esque head and no discernible facial features outside of two gigantic eyes. Kinda looks like Roger from American Dad. It looks like the exact depiction of a little gray man. The first ever sighting of the Dover Demon was in 1977 in the small town of Dover, Massachusetts. One Bill Bartlett was driving down the road with his friends late at night, until they saw something bizarre creeping along a low wall of loose stones on the side of the road. Initially, Bartlett assumed that it was just a cat, one of the most often mistaken creatures for cryptids. But as the headlights shone on it, he realized it wasn't like anything he had ever seen. The creature slowly looked up to stare at him, and he described it as having peach-colored skin with a rough texture akin to sandpaper. Not long after initially seeing the Dover Demon, it disappeared almost into thin air. The creature vanished. It's been wondered, actually, by cryptozoologists after this sighting if perhaps the creature had some sort of camouflage ability or some sort of transportation ability even. Given the extreme resemblance to little greys, the alien most commonly described as being the ones responsible for most abductions, could it be possible that the Dover Demon was something scouting out, a creature looking out from above the stars? Could that possibly explain why the creature was able to vanish so quickly? Was it just a remarkably sneaky little fella? Or is it possible that it was technologically advanced in some way, or being backed up by someone else who beamed it on back to whatever ship it came from? And finally, at our number 1 spot is the Flatwoods monster, a creature that has long since thought to be alien in origin and not a cryptid as some have said. The Flatwoods monster was first sighted in West Virginia because of course it was. Everything creepy is in West Virginia. West Virginia is nothing but beautiful, the most picturesque mountains you've ever seen in your life, and horrifying monsters all the way down. John Denver forgot to tell you that part in them songs. The Flatwood monster was described as being 10 feet tall and roughly 4 feet wide. It's described as being more mechanical in nature than it is organic, kind of a Darth Vader deal going on. Its most notable feature is its giant head with two gigantic glowing eyes, described as either bright red or bright green depending on who's telling the story, and it's got a giant cowl in the shape of a spade behind this big orb, making it look like a big weird alien vampire. Its body was armored with thick vertical pipes, and it's got spindly little arms. The first ever sighting of the Flatwood monster was in the 50s, 1952 to be specific. 3 boys saw something flailing out of the sky, hitting the ground nearby. The boys went home, and one of them told their mother that they thought they'd seen something fall from the sky, maybe an asteroid, and they wanted some help to go check it out. Always a good idea to ask permission from your mom first if you're gonna go check out an alien. Stranger Things kids would have saved themselves so much trouble if they did that. They gathered a small search party together, just in case, and the group gathered and sought out the farm where the object landed, and eventually made their way to the top of the hill, where they saw a large ball of fire, and reported smelling some mist that was making their eyes burn. A person in the search party then noticed that there were 2 bright glowing green eyes that were floating around in the trees, and he flashed his light to unveil what was hiding in the dark. They were then treated to a full view of the Flatwood monster in all of its horror. The creature then hissed at them and flew upwards into the night, never to be seen again. Now, over the years, detractors have claimed that the Flatwood monster could just have been the darkness playing tricks on people's eyes, and that it could have been just a barn owl obscured by shadow. I definitely kind of see that. I see a similar enough face shape. Barn owls are kind of weird looking, but I feel like the size would be hard to misunderstand. Plus, that doesn't really explain off the mist that was making everyone's eyes burn, or the strange thing that fell from the sky. If you ask me, there's a lot more to say the Flatwood monster is an alien than there is to say it's an owl. Number 5. Ghosts and the Men in Black. Our first story comes to us from the internet's front page and a very reputable trusted news source, Reddit. A thread was posted asking Redditors, Those who've encountered a cryptid, what happened? Now, it's worth a click through, there's a lot of good stuff in there, but our first story comes to us from a user, Amazing Banana. He describes being at a park with his partner, stargazing and enjoying the night. The park was smack dab in the middle between a little suburb and on the other side, some dense foresty area. As the two were sitting and cherishing the moment, making precious memories, our storyteller heard something coming out of the woods that sounded like somebody stomping around. Concerned about something suspicious happening, he looked up to try and see what was going on. He described seeing something walking around, hunched over and walking on four legs, wearing what looked like a white cloth over it. Naturally, he was pretty confused, so he asked his partner to describe the same creature as she looked at it, saying it also looked like something draped in a cloth. Scared and confused, the pair took off to their car to take off and leave behind whatever they'd seen. From here on, the two of them went out to another park to collect their bearings and saw a strange black, unidentified flying object that looked like a helicopter, but the OP said it didn't look like any vehicle he had ever seen before, describing it looking more like one of the vehicles from Avatar or Halo Reach. He said it flew in a way unlike anything he had ever seen. So what exactly was this? Was this a UAP and an extraterrestrial that they encountered in the park? Or perhaps, and this is just speculation on my end, could that have been a cryptid they saw? And the vehicle he saw afterwards was some sort of special government vehicle sent in to collect the sample? Black helicopters and the men in black, that kind of deal. The creature described could be something called a kune-kune, a Japanese urban legend of a cryptid that manifests itself as a thin, white sheet like a floating ghost. Now, the OP never specified where the post was coming from, so who's to say? We may never know. If you like cryptid videos and you like UAP videos, I have got boxes of cryptid and UAP videos. Just check them out on the channel, and hey, toss a subscribe if you're feeling generous. Number 4, the Enfield Horror. Enfield, Illinois was supposed to be just another calm, regular old Midwestern town. Sadly, for the residents, it would be plagued by cryptid sightings, its most famous being the one named after the town, the Enfield Horror. The Enfield Horror was described as a short, squat beast with 3 legs, 2 small arms, and bright eyes like flashlights, standing a bit under 5 feet tall. It has leathery, wretched skin and is not the kind of thing you ever want to see. The first spotting of the creature was in 1973 by one Henry McDaniel, a local Enfield resident. One night at around 9:30, McDaniel and his wife returned home to their children, telling them they'd seen something scratching on the door. Later in the evening, McDaniel heard something scratching at the door as well. He went out to see what it was, expecting to see just a neighborhood dog, but instead was greeted by the entity now known colloquially as the Enfield Horror. McDaniel fired at the monster and claims he did hit it, but the beast shrugged it off and hissed back at him, and then bounded away in long leaps across the yard. He reported it to the police, who came to investigate, and they didn't help too much, but what they found was concerning. 6-toed footprints and patterns in a 3-footprint pattern. And later that day, there was another report of someone else being jumped by a creature that seemed remarkably similar to the creature described by McDaniel. And this is far from the only 2 sightings of the Enfield Horror. After this initial encounter, sightings popped up pretty frequently around Enfield. No one ever found the Enfield Horror, and whatever it was has never been confirmed. So it could still be out there. Number 3, Wolfman. Of all the monsters out there, especially like the Universal monsters, my all-time favorite are probably werewolves. I don't really know why, just absolutely loved them. I used to draw them in my homework as a kid all the time. I really wanted to be a werewolf. I was bizarrely obsessed with them, so I'm a sucker for anything about them. Take a listen to this story here. A reporter on BuzzFeed asked the BuzzFeed community if anybody had any interactions with cryptids, and this story shared had me howling. That's a little wolf pun for you. Okay, sorry, let's get into it. One night when there was a blood moon, I decided to try and get some good pictures and went to a secluded spot just outside of town. Pulling in, I noticed a tree had fallen by a nearby creek, right about where you'd park your car to fish. I started setting up my scope and camera, and I heard a lot of rustling around the brush. Coyotes are common enough, and I had my pistol on my hip, so I didn't pay it much mind. The rustling soon became more akin to something violently chasing through the woods. At this point, I stopped what I was doing and shined a light to try and see what it was, but I couldn't see anything. I was off-put by the sounds, so I started to pack in my stuff to leave when I heard some splashing. I turned on my light and I drew my gun, flashing it, and then I saw it. This 6-foot tall thing with what looked like the face of a wolf but was too big to be a wolf or a coyote. It was as tall as I was. As the light hit it, it growled and charged at me. It barreled forward and disappeared into the cornfield. I left all of my stuff behind, and I came back the next day to find a farmer and some sheriffs. The farmer's sheep had been eaten the night before, so he'd been setting up trail cams and came across all of my things. I told them about what I saw, and they told me it was just a bear. But the tracks were definitely not a bear. Could that have been just a bear, and in a flash of fear and panic, he mistook it for a cryptid? Or could this have been a werewolf sighting? And he should have brought some silver bullets. Number 2, a ningen. A ningen is a cryptid I'd never heard of before, but after reading about it, I was instantly fascinated by it. It's described as a humongous, blubbery, whale-like creature, but there's a lot of variations on the creature depending on who's telling the story. Sometimes it's depicted as being kinda cute, to be honest. It looks a bit like a seal, beluga, or a dolphin. And sometimes it takes on a more humanoid, terrifying shape, kinda like a merman sort of deal. Interestingly, ningen is a Japanese word for human, implying that it should be more humanoid in description. It's described as being anywhere from 20 to 30 meters long, oof. And sometimes it's described as having a mermaid-like tail. Other times, having hands and hind legs. Basically, one of the few recurrences across all the legends is that it's got ghastly pale, white, blubbery skin, and is described as having a very blank face, with black eyes being one of the only notable features. They're first described around the 20th century, with most sightings of them occurring around the 2010s. There was a possible sighting in 2006 when people said that they found evidence of a ningen swimming under ice on Google Earth, but from satellite photos, it can be a bit difficult to ascertain if that's actually what's going on. Still, reports and stories of this thing keep popping up, so it could still be out there. And finally, at our number 1 spot, Chupacabra. The Chupacabra is one of the most famous cryptids out there. Its name translates to goat sucker, and depending on the tale, the Chupacabra comes in many forms. Most often, it's described as being a quadrupedal, canid-like monster. But some depictions also describe it as being bipedal and more humanoid in appearance, and some of the really out there descriptions make it out to be like a little alien goblin looking thing. Over the years, there have been several reports of people who claim to have seen the Chupacabra, and even people who claim that they've felled the legendary beast. Most of these sightings though get attributed to coyotes with mange, which give off a sickly appearance and definitely do look demonic. Time and time again, the Chupacabra is debunked as just an urban legend or a misunderstanding, but goats keep going missing, goats keep getting found with all their blood drained, so what's going on? It's spotted all throughout Mexico, Puerto Rico, and the southwestern United States, always propping up around livestock being drained of blood. So are there really a species of souped up super predator dogs out there? Recently, and maybe you've seen this weird photo going around, a strange bipedal furry-like creature caught international attention online when it was picked up by a trail cam just outside of a Texan zoo. Now there are some who claim that it could just be someone wearing a costume, but it looks a little too spindly for that. As well, skeptics raise that it could just be a coyote standing on its hind legs, which would make sense, but it does look a bit alien. It doesn't really have the stature of a coyote. I'm gonna be honest, if it looks like anything, it looks the most like it's Crash Bandicoot than it does a person in a costume or a coyote. So could this be the elusive Chupacabra? It's occasionally described as bipedal, and maybe it would explain why it's so elusive if it's able to sneak around like this. I just hope we get some answers on this thing. Number 5, the Dover Demon. Starting off on our list is the cutest cryptid on this list in my opinion, but still a creepy little freak. I like to start with the cute ones to kind of ease you into it. The Dover Demon first appeared in Massachusetts in the town of Dover, lending it its name. It appears as a spindly little demon kind of looking thing that sort of resembles a little gray, the traditional big-eyed aliens that you see everywhere. The Dover Demon is identified by its blank face, its red glowing eyes, and its hunched quadruped stature. The Dover Demon was first recorded in the late 1970s, discovered by 3 teenagers who were driving through Mass when they saw something bizarre being lit up by their headlights. Initially, they didn't think too much of it until they noticed that the creature in front of them looked more like a human than it did an animal. The driver, one Bill Bartlett, described the creature as resembling a baby with elongated arms, tan, sandpaper-like skin, which was coarse looking, and no nose, ears, or mouth to speak of on its bulbous, enlarged head. Bartlett claims that he only got a good look at it for a few seconds before it vanished off into the night. Now, there are some who speculate that the Dover Demon is capable of rendering itself invisible, or camouflaging itself because of the description of this story, and that during daylight it prefers to hide itself in the trees of Dover. Now bizarrely, I think some skeptics write off the Dover demon by claiming it was just a baby moose being seen at an odd angle or under strange conditions. And I don't know if I really buy that. I've never seen a baby moose at night in headlights, but I have seen a baby moose. They would have a bulbous head or front-facing eyes, and a baby moose doesn't have that, so I don't know if it's all that. A more pressing question, I think, is if the Dover demon is a cryptid or perhaps a visitor from another planet, because it does look a lot like the descriptions of the little grays. Now there's a bigger philosophical question there. Are aliens cryptid? Let me know about that in the comments below. And if you like hearing stories about cryptids and aliens, well, I have some great news, my friend. We got loads of cryptid videos on the channel, so get comfy, click through the playlists, and stay subscribed for something new every day. Number 4, Goatman. Up next on our list of cryptids that'll keep you from sleeping is Maryland's own Goatman. Now he might look like Mr. Tumnus, but he isn't going to take you to Narnia anytime soon, and there'll be no Turkish delight in your future. Appearing as a half-human, satiric hybrid, the Goatman is thought to roam around Maryland, but he's been sighted in Louisiana and Texas as well. You know, perhaps he gets bored, perhaps he was taking a tour. The Goatman is said to carry a hatchet with him, and not for hacking any lumber. He's been said to be responsible for missing animals around the wooded areas in Maryland. Now there's a pretty good historical precedent for goats involved in mythology, with satyrs as a mythical historical cryptid, and goats have been associated with Satan and demons for generations. But the Goatman himself has got a pretty rich history in Maryland folklore. Depending on who you ask, he's either just a cryptid goat man who wanders the woods, or if that's not satisfying enough for you, one particularly colorful origin for the goat man is that it's the product of a mad scientist's experiment who was experimenting with goats, and when it went astray, the goat man broke loose and started attacking passersby with an axe. I really like this one, and I choose to believe it's 100% factual. The goat man is a pretty popular folk story with teenagers, with urban legends describing the beast hunting down those who are looking to spend a little quality time at Lover's Lane. It's said he'll come and bleat ya. Bleat, like beat. It's a goat pun. It was pretty bad. Do goats do that, or is this sheep? I'm not sure. You know what? I shouldn't be practicing here. We're gonna move on from this. The Goatman still hasn't been seen as much in recent years, and I sincerely hope that he's still out there. Number 3, Qaluplaik. The Qaluplaik, or the Qaluplaik, is an indigenous cryptid, with most stories emanating from Nunavut, Canada, and Alaska in the United States. The Qaluplaik is described as appearing vaguely humanoid, but having scaly and bumpy skin, and long, stringy, disgusting black hair. They are described as being disgustingly ugly and that they reek of sulfur, and I think it's worth noting that you cannot find a single artist's depiction of these things that don't make them just look like vomitatiously gross. Interestingly, the creature is predominantly described as being a female monster, although some local variations of the stories exist where it is described as a male creature, but most tales revolving it describe it as a lady monster. The Qaluplaik is a bit of an icy boogeyman, snatching up children who misbehave, waiting around thin ice to crack up and drag those children down into freezing cold water. It's thought that the origin of this creature was first told as a story for practical purposes, as a pretty good way to get kids to not walk on thin ice is to tell them that they'll be grabbed by a gross ice demon. Allegedly, when they grab a child, they stuff them inside their leather burlap sacks, then scurry back downwards into the water. It's said that you can hear a knocking under the ice as a last warning that they're about to strike. Now maybe this is just a personal experience I had, and maybe some of you also had this as a little kid, but I was read a children's book called A Promise is a Promise, a Robert Munsch classic, that featured a Qaluplaik as a villain that was trying to get a little girl to bring her younger siblings to the Qaluplaik as a little snack, and it terrified me so much. I didn't even live anywhere near thin ice and I was scared about it. It scared me bad. Wiry black hair and sunken little eyes got me. Maybe it's not relatable at all, but I thought I would share that. I definitely didn't spend any time near thin ice afterwards. Number 2, the Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil is a fairly popular cryptid and has been subject to all sorts of sightings and stories since the early 1700s. And I bet you can't guess where it usually shows up. That's right. California. Nope, New Jersey. The Jersey Devil is commonly described as manifesting itself as a chimeric creature with a horse's head, bat wings, a snake-like tail, and hooves. There's an interesting folktale that says that the Jersey Devil was brought into our world when a woman was stressed out over her 13th pregnancy. Good lord, yeah, I would be too at my 13th pregnancy. Okay. She was nervous because apparently this pregnancy felt different, and I guess if she had 12 others, she'd really know. She said that she felt like the baby that was inside her was the devil. When she was ready to deliver her little newborn, instead of a happy little baby, the Jersey Devil was born, flew out into the night, and then spent the next 250 years terrorizing the New Jersey swampland. The creature is deeply rooted in local folklore, and to be honest, it's kind of beloved around Jersey. It serves as the name for the New Jersey Devils, and it worms its way into all sorts of pop culture, games, movies, TV, music. They love them over there. For years, there have been stories and sightings around New Jersey describing a kangaroo-like creature with glowing red eyes hunting on small animals in the surrounding areas, and lots of blurry photos of bizarre hybrid-looking creatures running around the countryside. There have even been hunts and bounties posted for the Jersey Devil with rewards for its capture. So is the Jersey Devil real, or just a beloved local legend? Number 1. The Hat Man. Rounding off our list is our most recent cryptid on this list, and a piece of modern folklore that is already making a lasting legacy. The Hat Man is a shadow person, or at least thought to be. Everyone who's seen the Hat Man has described almost the same thing exactly, most concerningly. A spindly, shadowy figure that appears to be wearing a hat. Sometimes a fedora, sometimes a top hat, but everyone describes him as wearing an old, out-of-date style, so you're not going to see him in a shadowy snapback anytime soon. He always appears fairly towering, and you can't see his face. It's obscured, or just not present, and the only thing you're truly able to make out are his pinprick red eyes poking out of the shadows watching you. Depending on who you ask based on the sightings, the Hat Man can be considered somewhat benign. Maybe. It's usually reported that the Hat Man appears to people who are suffering from sleep paralysis or insomnia, and most claims of Hat Man describe him as just watching, observing, studying, or whatever. I honestly don't know if that's better than it attacking you. However, it's not all just stories of nighttime stalking. There are some who claim that when they've been visited by the Hat Man, that he's jumped them or choked them, or they've felt burning sensations on their scalps or their chest. Although some say he's just watching you for I don't want to know why. There are many who believe that he feeds off your negative emotions, and perhaps this is how he satiates himself. It's said that people who are visited by Hat Man are those who are already struggling with something emotionally resonating. Sometimes people in the same family even report seeing the Hat Man in similar occurrences, so does he target specific groups of people? Or is it just certain emotions he hungers for? The Hat Man is shrouded in mystery, and even just thinking about him is enough to make my hair stand on end and start eyeing the coat rack in my room just a little suspiciously when I turn the lights off. Number 5. The Loveland Frog. First up on our list is the Loveland Frog, a cryptid that was new to me but is very quickly winning my heart, and maybe he'll steal yours as well. The Loveland Frog Man is a mythic humanoid frog that is a legend to the people of Loveland, Ohio, which is where the name comes from. The Frog Man is described as a 4-foot bipedal frog, mostly appearing to hide around bodies of water. I mean, it's a frog. Where else is it gonna go? It was first sighted in 1955 by a businessman driving home alone at night. He was headed out towards Branch Hill in Ohio when he saw 3 strange, short, squat, bizarre-looking creatures standing on their hind legs alongside the road. He described them all as being 3 to 4 feet tall with leathery-looking skin and faces just like a frog with giant glowing yellow eyes. The Frogman would go quiet for a bit and wouldn't be seen again until 1972 when a local police officer was driving home and saw an unidentified 4-foot creature running in front of his car's headlights. When he got a good look at it, the officer described it as a leather-skinned bipedal animal crouching like a frog, and it hurriedly ran towards a river. 2 weeks after that sighting, another Loveland police officer reported seeing the same creature, the same little bipedal frog monster. This officer, however, shot at the Frogman and discovered that what he found was a tailless iguana that had grown unusually large. Now, while for some, that was the end of the Frogman legend, there are still sightings and reports to this day. As recent as 2016, people are still claiming that they see the Loveland Frogman. To the people of Loveland, the Frogman is something of a local hero. They love the guy, and I gotta be honest, I sincerely do too. There's something about this cryptid story that's really doing it for me. There's no stories about him eating anybody, the Loveland Frog monster's not attacking anybody, he's just a happy little frog guy scurrying across the roads. I sincerely hope they're out there. And hey, you having fun on the channel? Drop a subscribe for new scary videos every single day, twice a day. Let's keep on going. Number 4. The Fresno nightcrawlers. Up next is the Fresno nightcrawlers, and let me just say right now, these are probably my favorite cryptid on the entire list. If I say another one is, I'm lying. It's these guys. Some cryptids are downright terrifying. Some cryptids will keep you up all night, and maybe these guys will too, but I personally find them downright adorable. These are the Fresno nightcrawlers, bizarre, rail-thin bipedal creatures with no discernible features whatsoever. The only footage we have of them is blurry security camera footage, which doesn't help identify the creatures much at all. They appear short with very, very long legs, almost stilt-like. The first reported sighting of one of the nightcrawlers came from a city in California, Fresno, where the name comes from. A man named Jose was at home late at night with his dog trying to get a good night's sleep, but was repeatedly disturbed by his dog barking at something out the window. He went over to quiet his dogs down and noticed something deeply bizarre on his security camera. He saw a pair of white, elongated creatures strolling down his lawn. The next morning he claims to have seen small footprints all over the lawn. The next sighting of the night walkers was in Carmel, also in California. A former Marine and his wife were driving up a hill, and they claimed that they saw a 7-foot tall creature that they described as a thin, pale, armless white humanoid walking on by. What are the night walkers? They're weirding me out. Are they aliens? Cryptid? Possessed pair of pants? If anyone's got a line, you let us know immediately. Whatever the Nightwalkers are, all I know is that I love them. I think they are downright adorable. I watched a clip of them walking down the hill like 30 times while I was writing this script, so just know that. Number 3, skinwalkers. Now let's shift to one that's not adorable even a little bit. Skinwalkers are an extremely popular cryptid, a person with the ability to shapeshift into any creature they desire. Sometimes the legends state that in order to shapeshift, they need to molt out of their skin, and in some legends, they have to wear the pelt of the animal they intend to shapeshift into. You know, sometimes skinwalkers are presented as monstrous, sometimes humanoid. The recurring lines through every skinwalker stories, though, is that they are absolutely terrifying, and under no circumstances should you ever look one in the eyes, as it's said that looking one in the eyes will not only draw its attention, but seal your fate. So take a listen to this story from Reddit. This post came to us from a Reddit thread asking, what was the scariest thing that has ever happened to you? And an anonymous Redditor shared this story, and it's probably one of the scariest things I've ever read. Beginning. I was a kid when this happened. My uncle and I were finishing up gathering firewood from my grandmother because it was getting dark. We were driving back on a dirt road, and I had this awful sense of being watched. Before I could turn to look out my window, my uncle shouted, "Don't." My heart felt like it was gonna beat out of my chest, and I heard a tap on the window. My uncle sped up and started praying in our native language. I didn't know what was going on, and I thought it was over until our truck dipped from the bed. My uncle then started saying, "Look at me and don't turn away," over and over. And then I heard it again, tapping from the window behind me. It was getting harder for me to breathe, and I wanted to cry. A minute or two passed, and the truck dipped. My uncle looked at me and said, "We'll ask your father to do a prayer in the morning so that the evil will forget our faces." Naturally, other people on Reddit were kind of terrified about that story since it's sending a chill down my spine, and they asked him what he thought it was, and the Redditor said simply that he thought it was possibly a skinwalker. What more is there to say? Number 2, the Flatwood Monster. The Flatwood Monster is another West Virginia native, and I've gotta ask, why are there so many cryptid stories coming out of West Virginia? I've never been there, so maybe somebody can clear this up, because all I know about West Virginia is anything John Denver sang about, and he didn't mention Mothman or the Flatwood Monster, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, the Flatwood Monster is a cryptid that's been thought to be an extraterrestrial in nature. It was reported to be 10 feet tall and roughly 4 feet wide. It's described as wearing some sort of mechanical suit like it's Darth Vader rather than a purely organical being, and its most notable feature is its giant bulbous head with 2 gigantic eyes glowing green. It's got a big cowl in the shape of a spade behind it that makes it look a bit like it's an alien vampire, and its body was thick, armored, and it has small, spindly little arms like a T-Rex. Now, the Flatwood Monster's first sighting dates all the way back to 1952, when 3 local boys saw a shining light falling across the sky, eventually hitting the ground nearby at a local farm. The boys returned home to report that they'd seen a UFO crash land and told one of their moms to get a search party going, and honestly, that is exactly what I would do if I ever saw an alien. I would probably still call my mom, to be honest, if I ever saw an alien. From there, they gathered a small search party to go to the farm to approach what they saw. When they reached the top of the hill, they saw a large pulsating ball of fire and smelled a mist that was making their eyes burn. Someone in the search party noticed 2 small lights and flashed his light quickly at them, revealing a creature standing 10 feet tall with glowing green eyes. The creature hissed at them, then glid upwards and head off into the night. What was the Flatwood Monster? Some skeptics have speculated that those eyes could have been that of a barn owl, and the face does kind of light up. The shadow was disguising it, so it would make sense. But that begs to ask, what was the mist? And what was the thing that fell from the sky? Was the Flatwood Monster an alien? And is it just me, or is the Flatwood Monster just the tiniest bit adorable as well? I know it's kind of terrifying, and its bug eyes are gonna haunt my dreams, but does anyone else think it looks a little huggable? It's shaped like a friend? Number 1, Mothman. Mothman is arguably one of the most famous cryptids of all time, and it's captured our heart since he started flapping around in popularity. Mothman's first ever recorded sighting was in 1966 in West Virginia, when 5 men were in a cemetery prepping for a funeral when they saw something bizarre rustling around in the trees nearby, and lifting off was a massive brown-winged creature that disappeared into the night, far too large and unwieldy to be a bird. From there, the legend of the Mothman began to rise. It would get spotted frequently throughout West Virginia and the surrounding states, but its home is West Virginia. 3 days later, after the first sighting of the Mothman, on November 5th, 1966, another sighting occurred. Roger and Linda Scarier were driving with their friends, another couple, Steve and Mary Millette, around midnight. While driving, the couples noticed that amidst the darkness there were glowing eyes that seemed to be hovering around them. They stalled the car a bit, unnerved about who these mysterious eyes could have belonged to, and through the darkness and the headlights of the car, they saw a creature that stood 7 feet tall with leathery wings folded against its back. The creature began to pursue them rapidly, matching the speed of the car at around 100 miles an hour. They tried to turn around to get a better look at the thing, but the creature screeched and flew upwards into the sky when it was hit by its headlights. Now this would be far from the last sighting of the Mothman. Since these early sightings, Mothman has been reported hundreds of times across West Virginia. He's practically a pillar of the community. I think he's allowed to vote. Some say he's a benevolent figure who wants to help people and warn them of dangers around, whereas others say that he's a more mysterious, nefarious agent, flying around sending people to their doom. There's an allegation that Mothman was involved in the destruction of a bridge in 1967 that led to the death of 40 people. Some survivors claim that they saw the Mothman flying around overhead after the collapse. Whether he's real, a West Virginian legend, a friend or a foe, there's no denying that like a moth to a flame, we're drawn to the story of the Mothman.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Beast of Gévaudan. Between 1764 to 1767, people in Gévaudan, France were fearing for their lives. A terrifying beast was stalking the town and taking the lives of many of the residents. This beast was described as a large wolf or something like a large calf or horse. Calf as in cow, not. Imagine like a large like someone's leg. Sorry. It was covered in reddish gray fur and had a long tail like a panther. It also apparently had a black stripe on its back and talons on its feet. The first victims were a bunch of hunters. The remains of 16 hunters were found in the forest, their heads all decapitated, their limbs scattered about. It is said that in the end 100 individuals died at the hands of this beast. To make matters worse, it also had the tendency to rip out its victims' throats. One terrifying encounter happened to a girl named Jean Boulet on June 30th in 1764. She was tending to a flock of sheep when this creature attacked and killed her. That's not all though. Another woman was attending to her cattle when the beast attacked her as well. Thankfully, she was able to escape it. She described it as, I quote, like a wolf, yet not like a wolf. The last time it ever threatened the town was on October 8th, 1764. A group of hunters set out to capture and kill this beast. The beast had previously mauled a number of people on that day. Later on, the hunters found it and shot at it. They didn't kill it, but they did drive the beast out of their town. Did he flee to another town? Did he go into hiding? Who knows? In our 4th spot today, we have the El Chupacabra. El Chupacabra is a very creepy creature with vampire-type tendencies. They like to attack animals and then drain them completely of their blood. When they're done, they just leave the animal's carcass and run off, which is quite strange. Normal animals like to feast on the meat, but this creature is only interested in the blood. So this creature has been described in a variety of ways. Some say it's like a weird reptilian kangaroo, whereas others say it looks like a hairless canine with red glowing eyes. Nonetheless, it's creepy. So the first reported sighting of a chupacabra dates back to 1887 in Wexford County. 2 lumberjacks were in the forest when they saw a weird creature dart by them. They described the creature as having a man's body, but a dog's head. It didn't stop there though. In 1938, a man named Robert Fortney reported a terrifying encounter with this beast as well. He said that there were 5 of them that surrounded him and then attacked him. He said that one of the 5 walked on 2 legs. Another creepy encounter took place in 1961. A night watchman in Michigan was patrolling the grounds of a manufacturing plant when he saw something weird in the distance. At first, he thought it was a person. That was until he got closer and realized that this person had dog-like features. years. He took out his gun and shot at the beast, but it did nothing. The last sighting that I want to talk about is one that gives me the heebie-jeebies. This story takes place in 1995 in Puerto Rico. A number of farmers would wake up and find their goats, sheep, and cows dead with a weird bite mark on their neck. Their animals were completely drained of blood. So does this mean that the Chupacabra is real? If not, what was sucking the blood out of those farm animals? Moving on to number 3, we have the demon cat. Now this is a cryptid that apparently stalks Washington, D.C. It all started back in the 1800s. According to a report in the newspaper, this weird cat appeared and scared a group of security guards. They all fired at the cat, but before the bullet could even hit the cat, it disappeared right in front of their eyes. Then in January of 1898, a watchman was patrolling around when he saw this demon cat come right towards him. The closer it got to him, the bigger it got. Some say it got as big as a tiger. Others say it got to the size of an elephant. The massive beast then snarled and let out a massive hiss. It leaped towards the watchman, but it disappeared right in front of his eyes before it attacked him. That same year, the cat made many more appearances. In fact, it's believed that the cat shows itself right before disaster strikes. It appeared before Lincoln was shot, before the stock market crashed in 1929, and right before JFK was killed. So before the next devastating thing happens, this beast might make a return. Moving on to number 2, we have the Mongolian death worm. The Mongolian death worm is a famous cryptid in China. It's said to lurk in the Gobi Desert and is described as being this giant red-type worm creature. In fact, its Japanese name literally translates to large intestine worm. To make matters worse, apparently it can spit poison at its victims from afar. It's believed that this acid-like venom is so strong that it can kill a camel or horse. Over the years, there have been a number of terrifying encounters with this massive worm. One story that gets shared around a lot involves a young boy who gets followed home by this worm. The next day, his dead body was found by his home. It's believed that he ended up touching the worm and died doing so. His family knew that the worm was behind his death, so they headed out on a trail in the sand looking for it to get revenge. But the family never returned home. Now that's more of a legend. Let's talk about a supposed real encounter with this slithery dude. The first apparent real sighting was during the 19th century. Someone was out in the desert when they saw this creature slithering around. They said it looked like a cow's intestine. He watched this creature for quite some time and actually saw it strike and kill another creature. A more recent sighting took place in 2013. People were out looking for it and actually found it and apparently even caught this creature on camera. But who even knows what happened to this footage? Because I want to see it for myself. I swear, I need my own myth busting show or something. And in our number 1 spot today, we got Spring-Heeled Jack. Dude, the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack is a pretty freaking creepy one. What makes it even creepier is the fact that a number of people encountered this weird half-man, half-beast creature. That's multiple witnesses, and they all had similar encounters, which makes me believe that this cryptid might be real. So back in Victorian England, people were worried about this weird man-type creature named Spring-Heeled Jack. According to a number of stories, Jack would visit homes in the middle of the night, ring the doorbell, and when someone would answer it, he would attack them. Now, he was given the name Spring-Heeled Jack as witnesses said he had the ability to jump great distances and heights, something no normal human can do. Victims say he looked like a man dressed in red shoes and armor. Others claim he would wear loose-fitting black clothes with a helmet, or that he had wings and horns and sharp fangs that formed a wicked smile. The first sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack was October of 1837. A woman named Mary Stevens was walking in her town when this creature jumped from a tall building down to the ground right in front of her. He then attacked her and tried to kiss her, but someone heard her screams and thankfully came to the rescue. They then both saw this creature leap away. And Mary wasn't the only victim terrorized by Jack. A girl named Lucy Scales was also attacked by it. Same with a woman named Jane Alsop. She was attacked and strangled by this creature, but she managed to free herself. Jane said this about Jack, and I quote, "He was wearing a kind of helmet and a tight-fitting white costume like an oilskin, and he vomited blue and white flames." Soon, more and more people were going to the police terrified by Spring-Heeled Jack. One person said they saw Jack jumping from rooftop to rooftop. They said he had glowing red eyes and big sharp claws. Due to the fact that so many people encountered Jack, I'm telling you, it might be real. Was he a human? Was he a cryptid? Was he a weird human creature thing? I don't even know, man. Let me know what you think in the comments below though.